Hi, my name is Christopher Penn, co-founder and chief data scientist at TrustInsights.ai, and this is how to think about the new Google Analytics 4. Doing this for the MarketingProfs B2B Forum. Want to start off by setting some expectations. This talk is, and what it is and what it is not. This talk is not an instructional talk on how to use Google Analytics 4. We're going to talk about how to think about it, some considerations for implementation, what's new and why the software is important, and whether it applies to your business. But it's not a point and click, do this to do this, click here to do this kind of thing. That's not what we're going to be doing today. It is just going to be the things you need to know to make decisions about whether Google Analytics 4 is right for you or not. There are courses that will teach you what buttons to click on. This is one here. The URL you can get in the slides. This is from Google itself, from Google's Skillshop LMS, and it is a lot of point and click. So if you want to learn the point and click stuff, this is a good course to take. It's free. It's free from Google. So what are we talking about? Why are we having this conversation? Well, Google Analytics has had a long and storied journey from early days, like back in 2005 when Google first bought the software from a company called Urchin. Fun side tidbit: if you've ever done any work with Google's tracking codes you put on things like social media links, you've noticed they all start with UTM underscore source, UTM underscore medium. It's a throwback. It stands for Urchin Tracking Module. And that is something that was found in the original software. In the beginning, this was great. This was way better than anything else we had at the time, and even better, it was free. Urchin cost $5,000 a month at the time, before Google bought it. And over time, the software evolved. Back in 2011 is when we first got things like multi-channel attribution, assisted conversions. That was a huge, huge deal that did not really exist in any non-enterprise product for a really long time. And over the years, Google has added on more and new features to the software, alerts, attribution modeling, things like that. But as with all things, they got a little stuck, right? They got a little stuck in the sense of there were some things they wanted to be able to do with the software that in its current incarnation, no matter how many improvements they made, wouldn't be able to get them there. And so that's what the impetus was for this totally new piece of software. It shares the name Google Analytics, and in a very rough sense, it is still Google Analytics, but under the hood, it's totally different. So let's talk about some of those things. First, for those folks who have signed into Google recently and and seen the new stuff, if you don't like change, if you want to stay where you are, we do know that eventually Google will deprecate, shut down the old version of Google Analytics, the ones that most people are still using today. It's not going to be soon. Now, the version, I'm going to call it Google Analytics 3. They used to call it Universal Analytics. That version is probably like 95, 96% of people who use GA are still using. So it's not going to go away anytime soon. Google has said we're not doing any more development on it. There's no new features coming out, just bug fixes and keeping the lights on. But everything new and all of their efforts are going into Google Analytics 4. So what does this mean for you? Well, if you're using the older version, GA3, you've got time still. How much time? We don't know. If I had to make an uneducated guess, probably anywhere between 2 and 5 years. For core products like that, like Google used to have the old GA.js tag. That still technically functions, but Google really stopped using that 9 years ago now. So you still got time. But I would start making your plans to migrate to Google Analytics 4, to start thinking about what does that process look like. And we're going to talk about that. Why? Why did Google do this to us? In a nutshell, it has to do with these lovely devices, right? Mobile devices are the reason that Google has made this change. The world is mobile. The smartphone won as the dominant computing method for most people on a day-to-day basis. It's the smartphone. It's the mobile device. And Google has had really good mobile device measurement for a long time. They bought a number of years ago a piece of software called Firebase. And Firebase, if you look at it here, the left-hand side looks an awful lot like Google Analytics 4, doesn't it? Is all about mobile app analytics. What are people doing in your app? How many daily active users do you have? How many days in a row do they keep coming back to your app? What do they tap on? All these things that Firebase is really, really well built for. And it's funny, if you notice, inside of Firebase, if you've already set up Google Analytics 4, you got a Firebase account out of the deal too. It's actually built right in. Why did Google do this? Well, Google realized that Firebase was a really good platform for understanding the mobile device. And rather than build a brand new product, what they decided was it was easier to sort of shoehorn traditional web analytics into Firebase rather than try to shoehorn Firebase into Google Analytics. And so the back end of Google Analytics 4 is actually Google Firebase. Now, why would you do this? Again, it goes back to the mobile devices. If you are on your mobile device and you're using an app and then you go to the company's website and you go back to the app, in the current environment, Google Analytics sees you as two different people, right? That's not helpful. I want to know, is it the same person in both? And as more companies have mobile apps, we want to know how much crossover there is. And Google has tried to detect this with things like Google Signals, for example, and cookies and all this stuff. But as everyone knows, tracking methods are getting a little harder to come by with all the new privacy regulations. And so Google was proactive and said, okay, we're going to build the architecture to unify these things and not necessarily need to use cookies. So Google Analytics 4 is built on these three technologies. It is built on the interface and the common metrics that we know and love from Google Analytics, for the most part. It is built on the Firebase measurement system. And then on the back end, from a scalability perspective, it has moved over fully to Google's BigQuery database. We're going to talk a bit more about that because there's some really cool stuff happening there. So that's what's in the box. That's what makes up this software. The key takeaway here is that Google Analytics 4 is built for a mobile-first world. And the more that companies do things like deploy mobile apps, the more sense Google Analytics 4 makes. If you have a website and you have a mobile app, Google Analytics 4 should be sooner on your roadmap for migration rather than later. Especially if you're already using Firebase, you really should be moving over to Google Analytics 4 sooner rather than later. Why is this so different? What's the big difference? A big part of the change in Google Analytics 4 is a scoping change. And what we mean by this is, in Google Analytics 3, you have a bunch of different scopes. There are hits, sort of the page view scope. There's the user scope. There's a session scope, a product scope. And in GA3, sometimes when you're trying to do reporting, especially if you're building out like a dashboard in Data Studio, and you try and mix and match scopes, metrics that are user-level metrics, and metrics that are session-level metrics, the software just kind of yells at you, says, you can't combine these two things, which gets frustrating as you're trying to do more advanced reporting, like trying to understand, bounce rate of a user. Well, bounce rate is a page view metric, and a user is a user-level metric, and the two don't get along. So in GA4, Google has flattened everything out to events. Everything in is event now. There is no such thing as a page view anymore. There is no such thing as a social call or a user timing or a bounce rate or any of these things. Everything is an event now. And this flattening means that it's now possible to be able to understand apples-to-apples comparisons of a lot of different metrics, to engineer a lot of different metrics that previously you couldn't. You want to understand the bounce rates on a per-page basis, on a per-user basis? Now you can. It's much easier to do that compared to what we used to have to do. You want to understand events on a website versus events in a mobile app. Now they're at parity. They're treated as though they're the same thing. One of the things that this changes for us as marketers is we have to stop thinking about things like page URLs and start thinking about events. If you have, for example, a goal in old Google Analytics 3, that when somebody gets to thankyou.html on your website, you normally set that goal in the old version as a destination goal and say, yep, you reached the destination. Now, in GA4 and with Google Tag Manager, you would say, I'm going to create a trigger that listens for when a user gets to thankyou.html, and then I'm going to fire an event to Google Analytics 4 saying, hey, person just got to the thank you page. While it seems a bit more circuitous and less straightforward than the old version, and it is a little more circuitous, it again puts everything on an even footing. So you can have an event sent where somebody clicks on, say, a button on your website that leads to maybe your book on Amazon.com. In the old version, you'd have to set up a separate kind of goal for that. Now it's just another event, and it's easy to mark that as a conversion, to say, yep, we sent somebody to Amazon, and we think that was a conversion. What else is a big deal in GA4? What's so different is it used to be, in the old version of Google Analytics 360, the enterprise version that was, as my colleague Tom Webster says, reassuringly expensive. You could get your raw data. But in the free version, you couldn't. It was simply not available. When Google rolled out GA4, everything got moved to BigQuery. And so you can provision a table of your own. If you have a Google Cloud account, you can open up your Google BigQuery page in your dashboard and actually see the raw data, individual events as they happen in your data. And this is really powerful because if you have a good data team, you can construct things like user journeys through the website on a per-user basis. You can do things like analyze the propensity of somebody to convert based on the pages they visit on your site, the order in which they do so, the timing, what channel they came from. All of that is in the raw data. And while Google may or may not build those kinds of analyses into their products, the fact that we have the raw data available to us as marketers is a pretty big deal. It's a pretty cool thing. And so one of the key takeaways here is that GA4 allows you that access to your raw data through BigQuery. Now, that's not free. That part is not free. If you sign up for Google Cloud and you bind in a BigQuery database, you will be charged for the usage of that database. Now, how much? Not very much, depending on, for example, my site is about 10 or 15,000 visitors a month, and my bill is about 15 cents, right? So it's not a deal breaker, but there is a cost to it. Now, you don't have to use that feature, but if you're planning on doing advanced data analysis, you're going to want to turn it on. That is one part that is not free to Google Analytics 4. Another big thing to keep in mind is that Google has changed its overall strategic perspective on how Google Analytics functions and how it fits into the Google marketing platform. Google Analytics 3 and all the versions prior to it were very much, Swiss Army knives, multitaskers, multi-tools that could do everything kind of well, right? In Google Analytics 3, you could set up tracking codes, declare goals, do reports. Architecturally, Google has gone to a best-of-breed approach, saying we're going to, instead of having an application try to be good at everything, we're going to have individual applications be really good at something. So again, in GA3, you had things like collection and analysis and reporting. And when you go into your settings in the old GA3, you can see that reflected, right? You have your admin side on the left, you have your property, which is your website, in the middle, and then you have your view, which is sort of a data perspective. And you have things like view settings and your goals and your content groups and your filters and things. In Google Analytics 4, Google has said this is an analytics tool. It is a business intelligence tool, and we want people to do analytics in it, analysis in it. And we see this reflected, right? The whole view is gone. No goals, no filters, no content groupings, none of that. It's all just out. And instead, we have things like property settings, the data streams, and stuff like that. You're probably like, well, where am I supposed to put my goals? What are we supposed to do here? This is the change. Now, Google Tag Manager is the standard for collecting information, right? It is how we collect information now, including things like what's a goal, right? By sending certain events into Google Analytics. GA is now the analysis engine where you go in and you explore and you tinker around. And then Data Studio is the reporting engine where you build reports. Once you've done your analysis and you know what you want to say, you know what kinds of things you want to put in place, that's when you do the reporting part. You make canned reports for your users. One of the things that people used to do in old GA3 was have different views for different departments, right? You have a marketing view and a sales view and stuff. All that's gone. Now, you would make different dashboards in Data Studio for the different roles, for people, the business users, to be able to explore the data a little, but not have to deal with the overwhelming complexity of GA4, and GA4 can be reserved for analysis. So to make the most of Google Analytics 4, you must learn and use Tag Manager in Data Studio. It's no longer a one-stop shop application. So let's talk about your migration. How do you plan your move to Google Analytics 4? First and foremost, you have to do an inventory. Your GA4 migration will fail, without a doubt, without a proper inventory of GA3. And your inventory starts by going into your settings and cataloging everything that you use. Every tweak, every adjustment you've made, every filter, all your goals, writing it all down, not in Google Analytics, but in somewhere else that we can take notes and say, yep, I use this filter. I try and get this type of data about my website. I group my content in these ways. You want a comprehensive filter, line by line, setting by setting, of this is what I need to know that I've done in GA3. But that alone is not enough. Because, particularly for larger organizations where you have things like those multiple views and multiple users and things, you've got to spend some time thinking about how do people use Google Analytics. And this is where user stories really come in handy. This is something that is an exercise you want to do and you have to do as part of your inventory of GA4. What is a user story? It's Mad Libs, really. But it's Mad Libs with getting people to fill out and explain a little bit what it is that they do with the software. So this is an example of a template. As whatever the person's role is, I use Google Analytics 2, the tasks that they're trying to do, so that, why do they use this thing? Right? Those are the sort of the three things that you need to complete in a user story. And everybody on your team should be creating these user stories. So let's look at a couple of examples. As a marketing director, I use Google Analytics to check out our website conversions so that I can forecast revenue. What do these stories mean? What's the point of this? Well, the point of this is this helps us map out the features that we need to use in each of the three parts of the Google Marketing Platform, so that we have accounted for everything. So let's take that user story. As a marketing director, I use Google Analytics to check our website conversions. So we need website conversions, which means we need to set up those conversions in Tag Manager so that I can forecast revenue. Okay, well, that tells us not only do we need conversions, we need event values. When something happens, what's the value of that event, right? I need to send those event hits to Google Analytics. In Google Analytics, I have to define the conversion events so I can track them in there and slice and dice them. And then based on this user story, I know that I need to report on this, right? We need to be able to report on revenue and forecast it. We need to report on website conversions. So these user stories are really important for mapping out which features in which part of the Google Marketing Platform we need to be ready to work with. If we don't have this, then what will happen is people will go into Google Analytics 4 after we've rolled it out for those people who will be using it and say, I can't do my job, right? I need conversion events, or I need conversion values on my event hits, and parameters set up declaring what my event hits are in order to do my job. And we will not have done that. We will have missed that and then have to scramble to either retroactively try and configure the application or disappoint users. We don't want to do that. So these user stories are really important. Make sure you got a user story not only collected from everybody who's going to use Google Analytics 4 and everybody who's currently using Google Analytics 3, and then map out every user story to the 3 parts of the Google Marketing Platform. There's way more than 3, but these are the parts we're concerned about now. As you do that, you're going to have this experience of finding some things missing. And this is not accidental. There are big chunks of Google Analytics 4 that have gone missing. Why? Because they no longer apply. Views and filters are gone. Channel groupings entirely are gone. Google says medium is pretty much a channel anyway, so we're just going to use medium now. The old version of Google Analytics event tracking, we had a category, action, label, and value, all those things, all of that's gone. It's now in Google Analytics 4, it's event parameter and event value. And this gives you a lot more flexibility, but it also does require really good governance to keep all those tags straight. So it's a bit more work than GA3 to keep people organized, to keep people being consistent in their usage of things when you're doing events specifically. Once you've done your inventory, once you've done your user stories, and you've mapped out all the features you could possibly need, and you've told people what things simply aren't possible in the new version, then it's time to roll it out. It's time to pilot your Google Analytics 4 implementation. And a really critical thing here is you want to run in parallel. Do not, please, do not turn off your Google Analytics 3 instance yet. Right? Again, there are features that have not been ported over. There are features that, if you're using them today, the ones that we just talked about, in GA4 they're not going to be there, and it's going to require some training time to get people up to speed. So make sure that you don't turn off your GA3 instance yet, or remove the tags from Tag Manager or something like that. Just leave the existing infrastructure in place. Set up the new GA4 alongside it. You can actually see this in Google Analytics 4. You can see there's just be a new property in your site. The next step after, setting up the test environment or the pilot project environment is to get people trained up. I showed this link at the beginning of our talk today. This is the nuts and bolts, where to click stuff in GA4. Anyone who's going to be using GA4, you need to send them through this training so that they can understand and learn, where do I click for this? Where do I click for that? And when they're done, they're going to have a lot of questions because, again, a lot of things are missing. But at the very least, you want to use this as the baseline. And again, it's free. So it's not like it's going to be a big chunk out of your training budget. After that, it's all about understanding which parts of the Google Marketing Platform system you do and don't have, and making sure they're all in good working order. Spend some time. Do a tag manager audit. Do a tag manager cleanup. If you got old tags in there, clean them out. You got old users in there, clean them out. In Google Data Studio, start cataloging all the reports that you're going to need. Start building those reports as soon as you've got the user stories and things from your customers, from your team. One critical thing, your dashboards, if you use Google Data Studio now, your dashboards that are GA3 based, once you switch over to GA4, it's not as simple as just change data sources. Actually, it's a bit more complex because some of the field names have changed. So you will want to pilot porting over the GA3 dashboards to GA4 data and making the adjustments you need to make so that users, once you do roll it out in production, don't have a jarring experience where suddenly none of the dashboards work. They will not be happy with you if you do that. So take the time to revamp and re-engineer those dashboards, kind of fix them up, map them, do all the new field mappings and things. And you may find that there are some things that in older dashboards don't work and the features aren't there. So you may need to come up with workarounds, or you may need to set expectations with the users that, that channel grouping report, it's not coming back, right? So helping people understand what the new reality is. Anytime that you've got a big transition of something like this, one of the things you can do to ease the transition is to find some kind of easy win in Google Analytics 4, some kind of easy win in the software, whatever software it is you're trying to move to, that will help people find a reason to use it, find a reason to like it. Like, oh, cool, I can do this in GA4, and I didn't think that, I didn't know that I could do that. That's really cool. So got to find a couple of easy wins. So let's show you. We're going to switch over to a demo mode here. And let's take a look at a couple of easy wins that you might be able to find. One easy win that I like a lot is in the Analysis Hub, which is where you're going to do a lot of your work. There are some really nice templates for exploring your website. The one in particular that I like a whole lot is path analysis. Well, why do I like this? Because in path analysis, if you've ever wanted to look at user journeys through your website, path analysis is how we get there. Is how we make those determinations. So let's change. I'm going to change this to page title and screen name. I've got a whole bunch of different articles and things. So what happens? Here's my SEO 101 article. That one I actually did really well. Let's look at that. Where do people go after that? Oh, they go to conversions, social media goals, disrupting cumulative advantage, learning data science techniques, things. Cool. What's conversations and social media goals? What happens? Where do people go after that? Actually, some of them go back to the SEO page. When you start using path analysis, you can start to chart out where are all the ways that people traverse our website. What do those journeys have in common? It's a really nice tool for being able to look at this and go, I now know where it is that people go on my site. That's a very handy thing to have, right? So that would be one, I think, very easy win for Google Analytics 4. A second one, once you've gotten events set up and working well, it's relatively straightforward to declare them a conversion in Google Analytics 4. In GA3, it's a multi-step process, right? But now that we've done the configuration in Tag Manager, it's much easier to go in and say, okay, I just want these things to be declared events. So if I were to look here, I have newsletter subscription goal as a declared event. That's something that I think is good. If I wanted to, track, if I thought videos were useful ways to judge whether someone's going to convert, I could just toggle this thing and say, that's now a conversion, right? And then in my conversions tracking, I can see only those events that are I've declared as conversions going through and looking at the data. I can see here who made it to my public speaking page. I'm going to click in on that. And now, as a BI tool, I can start to do slicing and dicing of all for people who made it to this page. Where did they come from? What did they do? I can do cross tabulations and pivot tables and stuff in here. So that's a second, I think, a really easy win. Is not only do you get the conversions made easier to declare them, but then you can drill down into just those conversions because again, they're all events, and understand them much more deeply. The third easy win, and one that I really, really, really like a lot, are automated alerts. Automated alerts there was a version of this in GA3, but it wasn't quite as granular. So I'm going to scroll down here on the homepage to Automated Insights. I'm going to go to View. And inside Automated Insights, I can either look at some suggested ones, or I can create my own. So let's do one here, and we can do different frequencies, right? Daily, weekly, monthly, or hourly, which is kind of cool. I'm going to do one here. I'm going to do one on sessions. When sessions decrease more than, say, 90% compared to the previous day, what do we think that means? it probably means that I broke something on my website. Something's gone wrong that I'm just no longer getting this data. So I'll call this Who Broke GA. Now I've got a notification that will send me an alert saying, hey, I think you broke your website. That it's no longer, that's no longer happening. I'm no longer getting that. So this previous version will do like that. So now I have this alert set up that Google's automatically going to do it for me. Another one that I think would be fun, and this would be great for any kind of thing where you're running a campaign, right? You've got a big launch happening and you want to see the needle move. You're going to spend crazy money, or you're going to be on Good Morning America. Let's go to hourly. And we're going to say all users. I want my conversions either has an anomaly, which I think is important, or is greater than equal to, or a percentage increase. So if I'm going to go with a percentage increase, if conversions increase 50% more hour to hour than the previous hour, right? What's up? Somebody tell me that this is really important. Change segment to have platform includes web. Okay. There we go. So now I've got this alert that's going to look every single hour and tell me, hey, something's up. You've got way more conversions than we were expecting. That's really powerful. That's a useful tool, because that tells us a lot about what's going on our website. And we don't have to log in. We don't have to babysit it to see it, right? The other thing that is kind of nice in GA4 is that because of the way events work, you now get 50% more conversion opportunities than in GA3. In GA3, you had 20 goal slots total. In GA4, you have 30. But because of the way events work, you can actually have nested events. So you could have things like a PDF click and call that a conversion. But then you can have various versions with new event parameters and values for different PDF clicks. So you could have maybe 40 or 50 different PDFs tracked and make it a little bit easier. Again, you could do this in GA3, and there's a way to set that up. But it was very cumbersome. With a new event parameter and values, it's much easier to set up a meta goal and then be able to slice and dice that meta goal to pieces. Start thinking too about those advanced features. Remember, we just said that the raw data from your Google Analytics instance is available to you, right? That is a gold mine, a treasure trove. Even if you're not necessarily a programmer, a coder, or a data scientist, or anything like that, you probably have people in your company, on your team, or an agency or a consultant that would find a lot of value in this raw data to look at things like the channels, the pages. What pages have a higher probability of conversion than others based on people's user journeys? And because you have the raw access to individual anonymized users and can group them up, you can actually build behavior-based personas just from your Google Analytics data and nothing else, right? By the pages they visit, by how long they spend on pages. All of that data is built right in. So be thinking about, what are the data possibilities? What are the things that I want to give some thought to? Like, yeah, I see that as a possibility, something that I would want to experiment with, and lay the groundwork, the foundation, whether it's planning for people and resources, budgets, whatever, for that. So there's a lot of stuff to happen there. Finally, after your pilot project is over and nothing's burned down to the ground, and nobody's torn their hair out, it's time to deploy Google Analytics 4 and rolling it out to those different users. And again, the big part of this is understanding who needs actual access to GA4 as a analysis tool, and who really just needs some canned reports that you're going to do in Google Data Studio. Google Analytics 4 is still actively under development. There are pieces that not quite ready for prime time yet. So if you are in a mission critical environment, do not solely deploy GA4. Definitely deploy it, but also have a GA3 environment right alongside it so that there's a tried and true fallback for you. And I say this because there were things like, for example, It took Google 3 months to put source and medium in the API so that you could use that in Data Studio. That's kind of a big deal, right? That is kind of a big deal. And the fact that it wasn't in there at launch was like, a little awkward. There are still a lot of challenges with things like e-commerce, for example. The big e-commerce vendors, they don't support GA4 yet. It's not available as of the time of this recording. Now, by the time you watch this, depending on when you watch it, it might be available. But as of right now, there's still a lot of things that GA4 doesn't do that the older versions do accomplish. And so you want to be very careful in those deployments. And with any kind of deployment, one of the things you're going to want to do is have a plan for support, right? Have a plan for feedback. If users say, yeah, those easy wins are great, but I still can't get my job done, then that, that's why you have the GA3 environment alongside. That's going to take some more work to either figure out what it is that user's trying to do, or to recognize that maybe Google Analytics isn't even the right tool for them. Maybe they need to be in Data Studio, or even something else, a different package that lets them maybe do a little bit more slicing and dicing, but doesn't need the Google Analytics environment, particularly the changed one on their desktop. So you do this. This all sounds great. What are the things that don't sound great? What are the things that, this could go sideways? There are 3 things that, in the deployments we've done for clients so far, almost certainly will go wrong. Number 1, your inventory was insufficient. And this manifests itself by somebody saying at the end of, the cataloging in the pilot phase, or even in the deployment phase, hey, I can't do X. Why can't I do X? And you're like, well, you should have told us that you needed to do X, 3 months ago when we started the migration process, the planning process. But again, that's why you cannot skimp on things like the feature inventory and the user stories. You cannot skimp on it. And you got to strongly nudge those users who are resistant to giving you their user stories, because if you don't, then they're going to be really unhappy with what happens afterwards. Second is the insufficient training, and that means not only the formal courses, but giving people enough time to use the new platforms. That pilot phase doesn't have to be fast. It probably shouldn't be fast unless you have a super, super simple environment. Having that time to train people, to get feedback, is really important. It's something we can't skip over. And number 3 is reliance on old features without new parallels. Again, something as simple as the default channel groupings. People have gotten really used to seeing them after 10 years of them being available. And now they're just gone. People are like, I don't understand how to look at my data, how to understand my data. And so we've had clients say, yeah, that was kind of a miss on Google's part. Now, will those features ever come back? I don't know. They're not there now. So you may have to develop workarounds for that, some training and education, and possibly custom software that you need to reprocess the data into a form that people can understand. Or alternately, leave a certain subset of your users on GA3 with the understanding that over time it's going to go away, and they need to figure out how to get the information they need without relying on the old software after a while. So that covers what you need to know about Google Analytics 4, how to think about it. It's a big piece of software, right? It is a total change. As we saw, architecturally, very different than it used to be under the hood. And that change is complicated for some folks. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in that. It's just that it takes some time to adapt. So happy to answer questions. Contact information is right here. If you got questions, let us know. If you just want somebody to do it for you, let us know. We do that professionally. But it's exciting. I'm excited about what the tool is capable of. I'm excited for the access to raw data to build really good models. And I acknowledge that, yeah, it's not going to be an easy, smooth transition for everybody. But it is, or it has the potential to be a valuable one, even just give power users the ability to slice and dice and explore their data to their heart's content. I think there's a lot of value in that. Thank you for watching. I look forward to hearing from you. Take care. Need help making your marketing platforms, processes, and people work smarter? Visit trustinsights.ai today and learn how we can help you deliver more impact.